Excused?
Representative Angelos?
Here.
Representative Haroldson?
Here.
Representative Pendergraft?
Excused?
Representative Sherwood?
Here.
Representative Smith?
Excused?
Chairman Bear?
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to start with House Bill 305. And Ms. Lean, Representative Lean, if you'd please come forward and take us through your bill. Welcome to Appropriations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for having me today, committee. I'll be brief so you can hear from those in the room. What I have for you today is a tax on solar energy production. And I want you to know that first and foremost, this tax on solar production is optional. There is nobody mandating that it must go into effect. I'll start you walking through the bill. I'm going to jump, there's a brief overview on page 1. Moving right into page 2, it talks about how this is going straight to the counties, the Board of Commissioners, as solar is already overseen by the county commissioners of every county. I wanted to make sure that this stayed within local control and that the state was not getting involved with any solar anything on the state level, that it all stayed very local. So the administration will come from the county commissioners. And then there is the next section of imposition. This makes sure that we're not taxing anybody that is making solar for themselves, whether they live off-grid and they use that as their power source, or they generate the solar and then sell it back to, say, for instance, Rocky Mountain Power, that we're not taxing that the imposition clause is there to protect them. There is an exemption on page 3 that talks about how we will not tax any facility that is owned or operated by the federal government, the state of Wyoming, or any local or municipality. At this date, there is none of that in play in Wyoming, but just to make sure moving forward, we're not going to tax an asset on the state. The second part of that exemption is electricity which is produced for the personal consumption of the producer. So make sure that besides the imposition clause, we have very clear verbiage that individual self-solar is not being taxed. Moving on to page 4, we talk about compliance and collection process, how the counties will have the authority to do so from the county commissioners to the county treasurers. I know that there is, walking through that process, the county assessor helps with that tax bill to be generated, but the treasurer ultimately is the one that ends up with the money and then divides it out from there. Enforcement, they're walking through page 4 to 5. On page 5, line 1, it says the county may establish the regulation for payment of interest for delinquent taxes. And then it talks about the penalties and liens that can go into place. And if there are tax sales, that there are no specific applicable provisions in the tax for this chapter. There's taxpayer remedies and then a statute of limitations for this tax. On page 6, we find distribution, that if a solar farm is to come in and say it goes over a mall or a parking lot, that the tax that would come from that solar farm being within a municipality then is shared 50% with the county and 50% with the municipality. The reason for this legislation is I know that we've got property tax relief and reform coming, and we're trying to give the counties the most tools possible. The other reason is the solar farms that are coming into Wyoming, the impact is greatest within the county. We want to make sure that the counties have enough money to be able to fend off any solar fires that could potentially happen, that our firefighters are properly funded from there, and that our counties are taking care of any roadways or impacts to their dumps and such for demolition of the sites. So that's an overview of the bill, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Representative Lean. Any questions for the bringer of the bill? Seeing none. Oh, sorry, Representative Sherwood.
Thank you. Apologize for multitasking here at my desk. On page 5, line 18 talks about taxpayer remedies. Did you think about pulling any language from, say, like other parts of statute to talk about if there's a credit, somebody accidentally overpays, how that they would contest that and get that payment back, or if there was an appeal process? I mean, I just love your thoughts on
Representative Lean?
if we need to be more prescriptive there. Thank you.
Sorry, Representative Lean.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Representative Sherwood. I am open to pulling any of that into this taxpayer remedies for appeal processes and credits. I had not given it any thought.
Follow up?
Thank you.
No? Okay. Representative Haroldson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Lean, thank you for bringing this bill and having the conversation today. Can you give us a high level of the tax structure for wind and solar currently and other generation models?
Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Harrelson, there is currently no tax structure for solar in the state of Wyoming, and I am not a brief to any of the wind tax, so I can't speak to that.
Thank you. I have a question. On the imposition, you had stated that this would eliminate this from being imposed on, a homeowner, a residence using solar. But I don't see that in the language, and if the solar is using the, where they're producing more than they need during the day, and it's being basically sold, and then they're consuming electricity at night, how does this imposition exclude those homeowners?
So the Mr. Chairman, thank you for the question. The imposition clause gives the legal staff the authority to know that, and then when we follow over to page 3, line 18, where it says, "No tax shall be imposed under this chapter upon electricity which is produced for the personal consumption of the producer." So we would make sure that any solar panels that are operating for the function of the personnel on that location are not being taxed. As for the selling back, it was my understanding from our LSO staff that the imposition clause covered that. But if it's not, I'm happy to get with them and get an amendment put in here to fix that.
Okay, so based on legal staff, you believe that they're selling, if you will, wholesale to the grid is not a problem for this bill?
Mr. Chairman, that is my understanding.
Okay. All right, thank you. With that, we'll go ahead and open up public comment. Is there anybody here for this bill? I'll start with, hold off on agencies. We'll start, is there any electeds that are here to testify? Go ahead. Thank you. Welcome to Appropriations. Please state your name and who you represent.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Robert Short, County Commissioner in Converse County. I also serve as the Vice President of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. We're very concerned about the potential implications of this bill insofar as the chilling effect it may apply to those who seek to develop energy generation in Wyoming. Unfortunately, due to the way regulatory factors impact the ability of independent power producers to generate revenues, bills like this could potentially make their return incalculable because they negotiate purchase power agreements prior to being able to actually sell their power. For a regulatory structure that has predictability, they would need to have some understanding of what a potential imposition would look like prior to negotiating said purchase power agreement, because they have no mechanism in place to recoup additional costs associated with their work. They may not be able to have a calculable return on their investment should an imposition be applied after the time that they've negotiated their purchase power agreement. Unlike our public regulated utilities, who have the ability to pass on through rate increases those costs onto the users, such an opportunity does not exist for independent power producers. The concern is that it could be a chilling effect for that kind of development in our state. In my county in particular, we have a 500 megawatt solar farm that has been proposed. Those folks have already put together their calculations associated with the investment necessary and what their ROI timeline looks like. Should we impose a tax on top of that, that could throw into a disarray their ability to function in a profitable manner. So we are very concerned about the potential for this to disrupt those types of projects and indeed put a chilling effect on those investments. Furthermore, inside my county, there are industries that rely heavily on the opportunity to put their folks to work, whether it be electrical apprentices, journeymen, or even folks who build the transmission or collection systems, linemen. They could be put out of work because of a tax that was enacted after such a project was launched. So as a county commissioner from Converse County, I would be opposed to this bill as it currently stands. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there any questions for the Commissioner? Representative Haroldson?
Thank you, Chairman. Commissioner, thank you for being here. As we look at it, if we put a delayed enacting date, like have this conversation about, you said as it sits unamended. I think kind of a frustration we've heard across the board is that there's an uneven playing field of some generations are taxed different than other generations. Some are subsidized, some are not. And so some of our legacy industries are kind of scratching their head going, it's just not quite fair. And so I think across the board, we're hearing these concerns. And so I understand what you're saying. Hey, we've moved forward. We've got our projected ROI. We've got all of our ducks in a row. And all of a sudden, we're going to lose 5% of our net gains right out of the gate, guaranteed. I will push back a little bit. If they have the numbers, they can just do a 5% less on those numbers. So we have, I think, that. But at the same time, what would happen if you did maybe a sliding scale enactment, or just talk to me about maybe some ideas that you may have of how this could be more palatable and not a burden on our industries.
Commissioner Sher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Haroldson. I believe that maybe a way forward would be to have the discussion with the independent power producer inside a commission chamber of those commissions that were interested in levying prior to the negotiation of the purchase power agreement. And I think that's the only way that the independent power producer could have some kind of certainty in what their calculation looks like for ROI. Again, because they have no mechanism in place to increase their remuneration associated with their generation once that agreement is in place. This, having it understood up front, may be a way to have a path forward.
Follow-up, Representative Haroldson.
Thank you, Chairman. So how long are those purchase power agreements in effect for?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I believe in many cases, Representative Haroldson, those purchase power agreements are 20-year agreements. So they're not, a year by any stretch.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Thank you, Commissioner, for being here. And
Thank
the
you,
public,
Mr. Chairman.
are there any individuals that'd like to testify on this? All right, on to associations. Thank you for being here. Please introduce yourself and who you represent. Tell us your thoughts on this bill. I will ask that you be brief. We're going to try to get through several bills here, so a couple
Of course, absolutely, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you very much for the time. Chris Brown, representing Powering Up Wyoming. We are a Wyoming-based grassroots organization supporting wind, solar, and storage alongside our legacy industries, with the understanding that as demand continues to rise for power generation, we're going to need all sources of energy moving forward as a state. Mr. Chairman, Wyoming has always prided itself as being a strong energy state. And one of the primary things that businesses look for when investing in our state is stability and predictability. The concept of an energy tax that could be appraised differently across all 23 counties flies in the face of stability and predictability. States around us are incentivizing solar development, and these are states that have a much stronger resource than Wyoming does. Wyoming's solar resource is good, but Arizona, Utah, Colorado have a significantly stronger resource, and they're working to incentivize this investment to come to their state. Mr. Chairman, it's important to note that industrial solar in Wyoming pays industrial property tax and sales tax, so the concept that solar pays no tax is inaccurate. I want to speak to Representative Haroldson's question. You asked about the tax structure of wind and solar. I just described solar. Wind pays industrial property tax, sales tax, and a $1 per megawatt hour generation tax as well. I'm fairly certain that Wyoming is the only state where wind pays a generation tax. And so Mr. Solar, excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
It is solar.
I'm trying to be brief. I understand that time is important.
I appreciate that.
Mr. Chairman, in closing, I think this is a curious approach to taxation of energy and electricity. I can't help but wonder if the committee moves forward with a bill that gives a local option for solar, will that open the door potentially for discussion for local option tax on other energy forms, again, undermining the stability, predictability, and favorable tax climate that Wyoming has? And so we would stand opposed to this new tax, Mr. Chairman, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brown. Any questions for Mr. Brown? Representative Sherwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And it may not be for Mr. Brown, thank you for your testimony, but it just triggered in my mind, what happens if there's a solar farm or project that goes across county lines?
I wondered the same question, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any further questions? Follow up? Nope. All right, thank you for being here. Appreciate your input. Any other testimony? And do we have anyone online? Okay, go ahead and have a seat. Please introduce yourself. Welcome to Appropriations. Share with us your thoughts. Yes. Is the microphone on? You got a green light? Push till you get a green light there.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name's Phil Cornella. I work for the Wyoming Operating Engineers, member of the International Union of Operating Engineers, represent Wyoming. I also sit on the Wyoming Workforce Development Council, Wyoming Building and Construction Trades Board, and we would like to oppose this bill. Points were very well said by Commissioner Short, and I just want to, I guess it's kind of hard to get out. It seems like every couple of years we start talking about wind tax and killing projects and killing jobs. Essentially what happened years ago when the $1 per megawatt wind tax was introduced, it killed a lot of projects in our state, cost a lot of jobs. This was years ago, but I think that there's a huge tax burden on wind already. And if we try to do the same thing to solar, we're gonna end up running those producers out of our state. That's my opinion. But holding these companies hostage by them not being able to see how much their tax burden is gonna be from year to year is, it just, like Representative Haraldson said, it's just unfair. When you're talking about wind and solar and you're not talking about nuclear or oil or coal or anything else. But my biggest thing is it has the potential for a lot of these projects to not happen at all, which would equate to zero tax revenue for the state, so.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Cornell? All right, thank you for being here. You seem like a very busy man with all the hats you wear.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Delancey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name's Cindy Delancey, and I'm here on behalf of American Clean Power Association. I know that time is short and you have some very important matters to discuss, but I just felt it was important to chime in on this. If this bill were to move forward, this would be a fundamental departure in current tax policy in the state of Wyoming. And I just feel if that is the desire of the legislature, perhaps a larger discussion should be had on this topic as far as opening up the door for the 23 counties in Wyoming to essentially pick winners and losers as far as their desire for taxation. In response to the bringer of the bill's comments about the need to create additional revenue, really the way to increase revenue, as many of you are thinking about all of this, isn't to raise taxes, it's to grow the pie. And so it's by growing the pie, if we were to go down this path and create that uncertainty and financial uncertainty in these projects, it puts a project proponent in a really difficult position to make the case to invest in Wyoming when the investors ask, well, what's our tax obligation going to be? And the answer is, I don't know. So in addition to just some additional comments from the bringer of the bill about concerns about raising revenue to address fire, concerns about fire, the industrial siting process is really a very robust place that those types of issues would be addressed to deal with impacts for local communities, which would be able to address any kind of additional needs for fire protection. In addition, through the industrial siting process, Mr. Chairman, it could be a permit condition that the council would be able to put on the applicant if there were such concerns. So in light of that, I stand opposed on behalf of this bill, but if this bill were to move forward, really related to the discussion of parity, I would ask the committee to consider on line 6, page 3, maybe changing the $5 to $1 to be comparable with wind and striking the rest of that area, because on that discussion as related to gross energy earnings, there's really no way, as was testified earlier, to knowing that there's so many different rates for somebody to be able to clearly and simplistically be able to determine what that term energy earnings amounts to. So thank you again for the opportunity to speak on this very important topic, and I'm happy to answer any questions for the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Delancey. Any questions for Ms. Delancey? All right. Thank you very much for sharing. Mr. McKay, welcome to Appropriations.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Rennie McKay, President of the Wyoming Business Alliance, and we represent businesses of all sizes, from all industries, from all across the state. So in this instance, represent some companies that produce power and are looking to produce power using solar, and also consumers who may or may not be interested in purchasing solar power, but may want that option in the future. And then also landowners and people from the agricultural industry, and they certainly are interested in this as an option. I think we're all pretty aware of the situation that's happening across the country and the globe, and that is that there is increasing demands for power right now. So we were in a situation where power demands across the country were flat to declining, and that's turned. I just saw from January 28th, the Energy Information Administration just published that daily power demand was up 12% from a year earlier. So that's the space we're operating in. And right now, businesses in Wyoming, we advocate to try to help them to grow here in Wyoming. And they're facing that need to find affordable power. And so this would impact them. And so we're in opposition to this bill. We appreciate the bringer of the bill. We appreciate all the work you all are doing on looking at that spending versus revenues and all the things that are on your plate right now. But these companies and businesses also are facing those same inflationary pressures that are having you look at property taxes. So if you're looking at the cost to purchase more power or to build more power, those prices are going up, and that's decreasing our competitiveness in that space as well. So just wanted to flag that, and then also wanted to just flag, as we look across industries and compare them, there's that challenge, but you also then have to look at our competitiveness across borders. So we sit awfully close to a neighboring state here. You can almost see, you used to be able to see a wind farm that used to sit in Colorado from this window, and that was just across the line. And so, when folks are looking to site these projects, the landowners are impacted by these decisions and also impacted by the uncertainty that a policy like this can create. So thanks so much for giving this some consideration, because it is significant about what you signal to the market here.
Thank you, Mr. McKay. Is there any other questions for Mr. McKay? Representative Haroldson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McKay, thank you for coming here today. So as I've worked 8 years in the power generation industry, and honestly, and I understand we're talking solar, but I'm going to lump wind into this too, because we're talking about renewables. One of the things I keep hearing from constituents is we hate the look of it. We hate how, to give you an example, a coal-fired power plant like LRS produces 1,750 megawatts. You'd have 27 square miles of solar panels to produce that type of a generational load. And it's actually that's not an apple-to-apple comparison, because actual rate or generational loadability off of a renewable is way, way less. So it's actually almost even twice that. And then storage. And so we're at this point where it's like, okay, so I drove through the Shirley Basin. It's not the Shirley Basin I drove through as a kid. And I asked the question, we got a bill on the Senate side, I think it is, that's a moratorium on wind and solar. There's a battle, you guys, raging on this. And I haven't taken a side, but I am sitting there saying, we have to have a very honest, real conversation. We see what's happening on a federal level where the subsidies could be running out. And we're asking this question of what's our future of electrical generation in the state of Wyoming? And you in the position you fill, where you're above and beyond the producers, you're just saying, hey, how do we create a really healthy, robust business sector in Wyoming? Can you talk a little bit to this conversation that I know you're hearing from other people as well? How do we change either, number one, the optic, or number two, the outcome when it comes to our renewables and the frustration people have towards them? And absolutely right, AI's 60% increase in power generation requirements. We all get that. But at the same time, I mean, Cheyenne's 24 square miles, the entire Cheyenne and its surrounding suburbs. So it'd be the entire city of Cheyenne and every surrounding suburb completely covered in power panels to replace one of our workhorses. What's the answer moving forward? And can you talk to that? And I understand this is a tax bill, but these are the conversations people are having in the realm of this. And then there's frustration saying, hey, it isn't an even playing field.
Mr. McKay, briefly, please.
Mr. Chairman, I'll try to be brief. A very important question, and I think everybody's wrestling with that. And it's true, because from the Business Alliance standpoint, we represent all of those power sectors. We're very much an all of the above alliance to support all of our energy producers. And, just frankly, I think that is what it comes down to, is we really do believe it is going to take multiple solutions. Not one of them is going to fix this issue. And that's why I think this is important, is to continue to give options for the private market to respond. And, that is, you're going to have to wrestle with that of how do you, again, what do you want to signal and what instability do you want to create? Because we are competitive with the neighbors for trying to attract these. And it's not just the power production, it's also the users. So we've got some great things happening in this state with some growth in some industries, from manufacturing to computing, and some of them are all going to be looking for different power sources. And I think we believe very strongly at the Alliance that it is going to be a mix, and you just want to preserve as much optionality as possible. And so two factors. Yes, you have to look at how one power source competes with another, and then also you have to look at the marketplace here versus our neighboring states. So thanks for the question.
Further questions for Mr. McKay? Seeing none, thank you. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sir, please introduce yourself and tell us what your thoughts are on this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Travis Spears. I'm with the Electric and Solar Specialist here in Cheyenne. We're a licensed electrical contractor and solar contractor, but the differences are that, in fact, we're a licensed electrical contractor. So when we talk about licensing and what we see, at least in the bill, I'm not sure exactly what that one all pertains to with the permits and the licensing. We're already having battles right now when it comes to license enforcement. So we're putting a burden on our local county commissioners or local inspectors and everything else to police a realm that's already not being policed. Another thing I want to touch base on is I saw in the bill that it is addressing electricity that is being sold. How does this address those commercial buildings that have the potential of installing a 200 kilowatt solar system on their building, as well as installing an EV charger, when we've had $14 million allocated to the state of Wyoming for the infrastructure of EV chargers and the ability to utilize that electricity? So if those commercial buildings are selling that energy and they're already being taxed to sell that power to charge these EV vehicles, and yet they still have a solar system on their roof, it's not a personal use now, but it's also a solar system that's not offsetting 100% of their usage anyway. So we're getting into the weeds of how are we going to figure out these tax structures. I think that this bill is incomplete in its position where it is now, and still needs to be worked in order to even have it move forward. But I also believe, without echoing too awful loud, a lot of the same points. I mean, I think it will also kill part of the job market. And we're already in a booming area here in Cheyenne. We have 400 houses lacking of what we need for our current housing. We have more people coming in. We have large data centers that are coming in. And we don't have the labor pool to build the houses that are going to house those people. We don't have the labor pool that are going to operate those facilities. But by killing more jobs, we're going to also attract less and less people too. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Spears. Questions for Mr. Spears? Seeing none, thank you. Appreciate you being here. Please come forward. If there's anybody else who wants to speak, please come on up and find a seat. Welcome to Appropriations.
Thank you so much, Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Marcy Kindred, representing the working families of Wyoming as the Executive Director of the Wyoming State AFL-CIO, and we have serious concerns about this bill. We understand and respect that Wyoming has diverse views on energy development. However, this isn't about choosing one energy source over another. It's about protecting free market principles and job opportunities for Wyoming workers. This optional tax would create an uneven playing field across our counties, making some of our communities less competitive for these job-creating projects. When we create county-by-county tax penalties targeting specific industries, we're abandoning the free market values that built our state's economy. Our members are ready to build these projects. We have the skills, the work ethic, and the pioneering spirit that Wyoming is known for. But this bill would put artificial barriers between our workers and these opportunities. We've seen how businesses make investment decisions. They're looking for consistency and predictability. By allowing different tax rates in different counties, we're telling these employers to look elsewhere, taking good Wyoming jobs with them. The proposed tax of up to $5 per megawatt hour or 5% of gross earnings isn't just affecting revenue, it's directly impacting our ability to bring home a paycheck and support our families. When a county implements this tax, they're not just creating policy, they're choosing to send jobs to other states. We urge you to reject this bill and maintain Wyoming's commitment to free enterprise and worker opportunity. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Merklin. Is there any questions for Ms. Merklin? Thank you very
Kindred,
much for
it's
being here.
okay.
Appreciate your input. All right, Mr. Merklin, I got you back. Ms. Kindred. Thank you, Ms. Kindred. Sorry, my fault. Please, Mr. Merklin.
Thank you,
tell us-
Mr. Chairman. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dick Merklin. I represent the Wyoming Solar Coalition with approximately 400 members in the state, predominantly here in the southeast corner. Just want to say we oppose this bill. But if by some chance it should go through, I would like to see some different wording in the exemptions. On paragraph B, you stated, Mr. Chairman, selling excess back to the grid will not be affected in this bill. Where there's a will, there's always a way to do something odd. So I would like to see if this bill should pass. I hope that it doesn't. I'd like to see the wording that you used earlier, Mr. Chairman, to be added to that for complete clarification with regards to the excess that a solar owner would put back on the grid and be paid for at the year end.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Merklin? All right, thank you for being here. We appreciate your input.
Thank you.
Is there anybody here for the bill? Okay, anyone else against? All right, we're going to close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure? Okay, not receiving a motion. One more chance. One, ask him twice, ask him 3 times. That fails for lack of motion. Yes, Representative Harrelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to the bringer of the bill, I think it's a conversation that needs to be had. I just think it's not the way to have it. And so looking forward to having a deeper conversation on this in the future.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, Representative Angelos.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to echo, I'm from coal country. So, you know, this definitely is something that does need to be addressed. I think we can look at maybe in the future addressing a bill and making it equal to what wind is being taxed. I mean, still on an unequal playing ground when you come from coal country. So I just want to say that I absolutely not against the bill, want to see a different form of it come.
Anyone else? All right. Thank you again. We're moving on now to House Bill 316. All right. think we let our staff get away from us here. Chairman Brown, let's go ahead and we'll skip on to your bill just to expedite things. That way it'll give our staff time to get here for that bill. Please present House Bill 293 to us, and welcome to Appropriations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, Appropriations Committee, you're going to see House Bill 21 in front of you. This is, I believe, one of 4 bills from your Select Committee on School Facilities. The quick and dirty of this particular bill is this is a recommendation brought out of our 2020 recalibration. This was a recommendation, and I think the best way to discuss this is the narrative that has been heard many, many times before, that the longer we delay routine maintenance, it becomes major maintenance, and then when it becomes major maintenance, it becomes very, very expensive. This is the recommendation that was brought to us by the department, saying that the recommendation off of where we're basically coming from on our routine maintenance is for our our routine maintenance worker calculation. We have not adjusted that correctly, and we have not adjusted that technically since 2005. And so what you're looking at here is a codification of the recommendation brought forward through the recalibration in 2020, modifying that forward, and then appropriating a $2 million appropriation to the School Foundation Program account to ensure that we get that up and running this year with the correct amount preceded. And Mr. Chairman, that's the quick and dirty of it. I'd certainly be more than happy to stand for any questions, but that is ultimately the bill.
Okay, any questions for the bringer? Okay, thank you very much for presenting that. Is there anybody here to testify on House Bill 21? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure? Move the bill. Do I have a second? Seconded by Representative Angelos. All right, let's work through the bill. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4. Any discussion on the bill?
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Sherwood, please.
I think this is a signaling that we take recalibration seriously and that we take the recommendations from recalibration seriously. I am very much, I'm very excited about this bill because I do believe it'll help us save money on the back end in terms of major maintenance. But out of curiosity, I did some quick math. We have 48 districts, and over a 3-year period, that will increase the maintenance staff by roughly 1.5 per district, just for reference.
Thank you for sharing that. Any other comments on the bill? Okay, seeing none, no motions. Ms. Childers, would you please take the roll?
Roll call vote, House Bill 21, Representative Allemand, excused. Representative Angelos.
Aye.
Representative Haroldson.
Aye.
Representative Pendergraft.
No.
Representative Sherwood.
Aye.
Representative Smith voted no via absentee. Chairman Bear.
No.
Mr. Chairman, 3 aye, 3 no, 1 excused.
Okay, that bill fails on a tie vote, and so we'll move on. I think we need to dispatch next with House Bill 316, School Finance Model Recalibration. And I think we have staff that will present the bill to us. And I appreciate you giving us a quick rundown on this. I have asked the committee to observe, what we did in the Management Council Committee, so we have a pretty good grasp of the bill, I believe, unless I see objection. And several of us were in the room when this was presented before. So just a real brief overview, please.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. Tanya Heitrick, Operations Administrator with the Legislative Service Office. House Bill 316, as you stated, is the School Finance Model Recalibration -2. It's brought to you by Management Council. Section 1 in subsection A establishes a select committee to be comprised of 12 members, 6 appointed in the House, 6 appointed in the Senate, with one of those being a minority party on each side. Those appointments will be made by the Speaker and the President. Moving on to subsection B on page 2, lines 9 through 12. This provides that the chairman will be appointed also by the Speaker and the President. Page 2, line 14 through page 3, line 7, and create subsection C. This is really the meat of the effort, which requires the recalibration of the education resource block grant model to ensure it remains a cost-based approach. And it also commands that your consultant in this committee look at any court decision. Most of you are aware there is school finance litigation pending in the First Judicial District. We anticipate a decision in that case imminently. As a result of Management Council's action, there are 2 new provisions in this bill from the prior draft, and that is that this committee will look at specifically virtual education as well as charter schools. It also authorizes Management Council to secure expert consultants along with LSO to undertake this work. Page 3, lines 9 through 12 creates subsection D. This requires the select committee to report its recommendations and any legislation to the body next year. Importantly, it also authorizes the select committee to sponsor legislation. Subsection E, lines 14 through 19, requires that those appointments are made no later than March 31st of 2026, with the committee expiring on February 9th of 2026. Oh, and excuse me, February 31st of 2025. I apologize. It also provides that any vacancy will be filled by the Speaker or the President. Moving on to subsection F. This is the section that requires state agencies, the Department of Education, school districts, and the School District Advisory Committee to assist you with this work. In section 2, or excuse me, yes, section 2 on page 4 appropriates first $800,000 for purposes of securing a consultant, and then secondly, on page 4, line 22 through page 5, line 12, it appropriates an additional $120,000 for the expenses of the committee. And section 3, page 5, lines 14 through 17 provides that this act is effective immediately. Mr. Chairman, subject to your questions, if you have questions about the statutory reference for recalibration or what this effort will entail, I'm happy to discuss those. We did provide a public memo to the committee outlining prior recalibrations, as well as each of those recalibrations are hyperlinked in that memo. So should the committee wish to dive into those prior recalibrations, those are available.
Thank you, Ms. Heitrick. Any questions for Ms. Heitrick? Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 4, line 2, it mentions professional consultant experts. Could you just take a minute and talk about the spectrum that's there? Who are we looking at?
Go ahead, Ms. Heitrick, or Mr. Wilmoth, whichever preferred.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, Representative Pendergraft, I can respond to that. You currently have under contract Larry Pikus and Associates. That's primarily Larry Pikus and Alan Oden. They work closely with Dr. Taylor and Dr. Stoddard. You've heard from both of those consultants in your work related to the external cost adjustment. I would mention that at the Management Council in November, so of the 68th legislature, they authorized a desk audit of the current school finance recalibration model, and that report is pending. It should be delivered in April. You could certainly contract with Larry and continue that effort. He's been a consultant to the state for approximately 20 years in one fashion or another related to this specific work. I would note that the Supreme Court has relied heavily on your expert consultants in these litigation matters. And another option is to go out for a request for proposal. Time is of the essence with the request for proposal. That is not an easy process.
Thank you. Any further questions? All right. Thank you for being here and presenting. Stay close by in case we have questions. All right. Is there any public comment on this bill? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure? Okay. Moved by Pendergraft, seconded by Sherwood. Page 1. Page 2. Ms. Hytrek, I have a question here on page 2. I should have asked you earlier. We added language in Management Council to specifically, you're welcome to answer from there, I think, if you've got a microphone over there. Just a quick question. We added this new language to include virtual schools and also charter schools. Is this language necessary, or will the committee have the latitude to bring in all those? And I assume we're going to take into the scope of the work will include all things that impact public education. Would that be an accurate statement?
Mr. Chairman, I do believe that's an accurate statement. Those changes, recall, were made at the request of specific individuals at that meeting, but certainly the Select Recalibration Committee, within their prerogative to, cost out any and all components of the model, I think that would be expected.
And what about non-public school things that would impact the model or the recalibration? Is that appropriate for that committee to entertain comments from other types of education that are not part of the model or recalibration?
Mr. Chairman, typically and historically and pursuant to statute, it is a recosting of those elements within the public school basket of goods, how that is delivered across the school districts, and it is the Education Resource Block Grant model. There's nothing prohibiting you from expanding this committee and its purview, but I would not say that that is currently within this bill draft and not something that we have done previously and not within the statute that governs recalibration.
Okay, thank you for that. Any comments on page 2? Any motions? Representative Harrelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question on the 6-member conversation. Has it always been that's historically what it is? How do we come up with that 6 as we look at the hours required to make this recalibration reality? If we talked about 5 instead of 6, just to where we open up the pool a little bit more or less, if you want to call it that. Is that a consideration, or is this statutorily outlined? Could you speak to that?
Go ahead, Ms. Hytrek.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Harrelson, no, certainly the composition of this committee could be changed. Historically, it has been 5 or 6 members. The directive in drafting the bill was to structure it as the prior recalibration, which was 6 and 6. Also, the composition of the committee has varied as well. In certain instances over the past, this committee has been directed to include the chairman of the Joint Education Committee and the chairman of the Joint Appropriations Committee, or various members of leadership. This is just the fashion that was directed by LSO, and we operationalized that.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to suggest an amendment to page 2, starting line 1, strike 6 and replace with 5, and then on line 5, strike 6 and replace with 5.
Is there a second? Second by Angelos. Any discussion on the amendment? I'll give some discussion. I would resist this. I think our leadership looked at, what it would take to really put the right expertise on the committee. I guess I would push back and ask the Speaker Pro Tem to let us know what is motivating this change after management councils. Go ahead, Representative Harrelson.
Chairman, just the conversation as we've been having about, we had an amendment brought to management council from another entity stating less numbers. My experience when I've worked with committees and boards is there's that sweet spot, fine line, where it goes from, I feel, more workable to maybe just a little too many opinion type size. And just, I thought for ease of movement as a committee, 6 to 5, I thought was a good move. I'm not hard set on it, just more than anything wanted the conversation.
Any further comments on the amendment? All right. Seeing none, All those in favor of Harrelson's amendment, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Okay, that fails. All right, any further amendments on page 2?
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Representative Pendergraft.
I would move on page 19.
Page 2, page 19.
Yeah, page 2, line 19. After directives, strike the language, the select committee shall study, down to the line 23 through the word predictable. And just take that language out on the virtual schools.
Seconded by Sherwood. Any discussion of expanding that to also the charter school funding models? I think we have the latitude to do that.
I would rather leave the charters in there as they are incorporated within the public school model.
I think that the virtual school is as well. So, okay. Any further discussion on the amendment? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of Pendergraft's amendment, say aye. Seeing none, that fails. Okay. Moving on, page 3, page 4. Page 4.
Mr. Chairman, I was
Sherwood?
still erasing. For the committee's consideration, I'd like to make a motion to combine the two appropriations. So on page 4, line 7, and on page 4, line B. If we choose to do an RFP, I think having that collapsed amount isn't advertising to a potential consultant how much money we have to spend on this.
Okay, you've heard the motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Pendergraft. Any discussion on the motion? I have a question for staff. Is that any difficulty combining those two? Okay. Any further discussion on the amendment? All right, all those in favor of Rep. Sherwood's amendment, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. That carries. Okay, any further amendments on, or motions on page 4? Page 5? Okay, seeing none. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Ms. Childers, would you please take the roll?
Roll call vote on House Bill 316 do pass with amendment. Representative Allemand is excused. Representative Angelos? Aye. Representative Haroldson?
Aye.
Representative Pendergraft?
Aye.
Representative Sherwood?
Aye.
Representative Smith voted aye via absentee. Chairman Bear?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, 6 aye, 1 excused.
Okay, that does pass. Turning the chair over to because I was one.
You're good. Okay.
Chairman Bear, I would ask you to bring us House Bill 293.
All right, House Bill 293. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is cleaning up all of the, well, not all, but some part of the accounts that we have within our finance models. We have an account called the School Foundation Program Reserve Account, and we've been adjusting the cash flows in and out of this on a pretty regular basis. You'll see in this particular bill, we address session laws as well as the statutes in the green books. And the reason is we have pretty standard funds that flow into and out of this account. In fact, I have provided you with a document from page 15 of the budget data book, and you can see where this account shows up in the bottom right-hand corner. 1/3 of the amount of this severance taxes over $402 million goes into this account. And you can see currently in fiscal year 25, there's a note there that it's $0. So this account, because of the amount of severances taxes, it's really not being used. But it does have a balance in this account that's sitting there that this bill portends to capture. And my intent with this bill is to put those funds into the Common School Permanent Land Fund Spending Policy Reserve Account. There's a mouthful. And that account is commonly, as of 2 years ago, is really what we call the 5X or 7X account. And the issue here is trying to get enough funds into these accounts so that we can invest them in a way where we're getting a great return. Once we get to 5X, it will pay for the funds that flow out of this account, and we do address that in the bill as well, and I'll walk through that in just a moment. So again, the concept is to get the 5X account up to 5X, and this 92 million that's sitting in this account would get us very close. And I think Mr. Richards here, he can tell you exactly how close this would get us to the 5X. The upper limit of that account that we're going to switch all of these funds into is 7X. Once it reaches that 7X, then we would, any additional growth in the account would go into the Permanent Land Fund, which we also get reserves, we get revenue off of the interest and earnings off of that account. So this is in an effort to speed up our investments into better returns and shore up the confidence we have in funding our school foundation program. So with that, I'll just walk you through the bill. You know, the first page just gives our short and long titles. You can see on line 4 of page 2, it says from the severance tax distribution account. So that's the kind of funds that are going into this account. And it's those that are exceeding, you can see on line 6 and 7, $155 million. You can also see that on the little chart that I provided you. Just below the horizontal arrow, you can see severance taxes over 155 million goes to the right into this area where we divide it up. And that's the part that is in session laws, how that excess of 155 million is divided up. So here on line 10, we strike all of the language in the green books that deal with funds going into this account. We also repeal Wyoming Statute 21-13-306 and 39-14-801, which describe this account and its use. Wyoming session laws, I mentioned that earlier in section 3 on line 16, are repealed. And that's just what we did last year with the division of these funds. But of course, we're not getting funds that many funds, so there is really no division. And then we also, then in section 4, the heart of the bill, we repeal this account. So this account would go away. And then when we go into section 5, that's the outflow for that account. And it says that they shall be transferred to, and it says to the Common School Permanent Fund Reserve Account, and that's this 5X by 7X. And any unexpended funds are addressed on line 3, on page 3, and then reversions are dealt with on line 8. Line 9 also talks about reversions. And then we do have section 16 that we add that the state auditor shall report, and we have a period of 2026 and 27. We want to know how this account is doing, and that report will be given to the Joint Appropriations Committee on amounts and transfers so that we can have a good idea of whether this is actually working in that 5X, 7X plan, which our CEIO, Chief Investment Officer, is very enthused about. And then on page 4, we have this taking effect immediately. And I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Chairman Bear. Any questions for the chairman? Representative Sherwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for talking about how this will be positively impact our investment earnings. So this is, if it's a stretch, I apologize, but so there is a bill over in the Senate, I think it's 168, that repeals the BRA account. And so maybe for an illustrative purpose, right now there's a tip in place out of the Common School Permanent Land Fund Spending Policy Reserve. Man, we need to get better visuals for all these. If you could just opine on what how that bill may or may not interact with this bill in terms of collapsing and combining accounts. That would be helpful. Thank you.
I will do my best.
Chairman Bear?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will do my best, Representative Sherwood, because I haven't studied that bill, but I know that the bringer of that bill has the same intent of just cleaning up these accounts that are flowing through. And if you look at the chart, you can see on the left side here where it says severance taxes over 155 million, and then below that is everything under 155 million, and you can see 2/3 going to the budget reserve account and 1/3 going to the general fund. And then on the right, you'll see that it goes to the general fund, the budget reserve account, and the school foundation reserve account. So my recollection of that bill is that we're just cleaning that up so that we're not discussing overages and under, and we're making sure that the school foundation reserve account is getting the funds that it would in this particular scenario.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Further questions? I do have at least one. Again, thank you for being here. I know it's a struggle.
Yes. Yes, Mr. Chairman. I had to walk a long ways.
So I'm looking at what seems to me redundant accounts, and I think that's the purpose here. In your investigations and in your study, were you able to come up with a reasoning that they justified making these accounts in the first place, and what has changed?
I would defer to Mr. Richards for the historical significance and development of these accounts, but from my perspective, I would just say that there's been a lot of change, and honestly, with 90 to 93 legislators, there's a lot of different ideas, and when you have one group of leadership or appropriators having one direction and vision, and then they're replaced maybe by another, that there's just been change over time, and some of these things have, with the reduction in revenues, then some of those flows and tips no longer become effective. And so I think that really has a lot to do with it. But just to bring it back to the purpose of this bill, with those funds, I'll just say stranded out there, if you will, in a small account that's got to be liquid because there's a spending policy in and out, and we saw that in the bill. It precludes the investors from being able to invest it into longer-term, higher rate return investments. And that's that whole idea of a 5 times spending policy is what we're talking about when we say 5 times. So if we can accumulate enough in the account that we have 5 times what flows out of the account, the investors feel comfortable then taking that 5 times, or at least a large portion of it, and investing in longer-term, higher yield investments. And so ultimately, I think that's the deal. Whatever happened in the past, at this point, we're where we're at, and we'd just really like to ensure that our school funding is very secure in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Richards, would you care to opine on that at any point? And I would also ask, do you see any pitfalls?
Mr. Chairman, Don Richards, Budget and Fiscal Administrator for LSO. I think I would concur with Chairman Bear's comments. Over time, there have been a number of accounts. I think the PLF holding account was a precursor to this account, for example. I think the creation of it, there was an intent to have a checking account and a savings account for the general fund side, and a checking account and a savings account for the K-12 side. This would have been quote unquote an e-LISRA, meaning a rainy day fund for K-12, but as you can see, it never grew like the LISRA account grew. So it is indeed, there's been no appropriation from it. It has no dedicated source. The one source of revenue that is there is only for the period of the budget. So it is, I think Representative Bear used the term stranded. It is unique compared to the LSRA, but it's entirely a policy choice as to how many and which accounts you retain.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. Committee, any further questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
If I may, this may be a good time for Representative Sherwood's question to be answered by Mr. Richards as far as that other bill that I'm less familiar with.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Richards?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Representative Sherwood. I don't believe they have any interaction, the two bills. Either bill can pass without the other, or they can pass collectively, or obviously they could both fail. Where they impact the same page in terms of the distribution is the handout, which is the severance tax. And it would be, I think, if both passed, you would have just one line above the threshold, which would go to the general fund then.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Are there any agencies, excuse me, first of all, any legislators? I don't see any agencies that would like to take this up. Seeing none, Ms. Childers, is there anyone online?
No, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Childers. Is there any public comment from within the room? Seeing no comments, I would close public comment and move this bill back behind the dais. Committee, any motions, any comments? Move to pass by Representative Haroldson, seconded by Representative Angelos. Any initial comments before we walk through the bill? Seeing none, any comments or amendments to page 1? Page 2? Page 3? Page 4? Page 5? Seeing none, let's take it to a vote.
Roll call vote on House Bill 293, do pass. Representative Allemand excused. Representative Angelos.
Aye.
Representative Haroldson.
Aye.
Representative Sherwood.
Aye.
Representative Smith voted aye via absentee. Chairman Bear.
Aye.
Vice Chair Pendergraft.
Aye. Thank you, Ms. Childers.
Mr. Vice Chair, 6 aye, 1 excused.
Thank you. Having received the majority of the votes, House Bill 293 has passed appropriations. Without any further comments, we are adjourned.